The ultrasound image on her phone screen made my world collapse in that instant. It clearly showed 8 weeks pregnant printed at the top. Lisa, my wife's best friend, was carrying my child, and standing before me was my wife, Emma. Her face a mixture of fury and despair, tears silently streaming down her cheeks. Do you understand what this means? Emma's voice was barely audible, yet it crashed like thunder in my ears. You've destroyed everything. I didn't know how to respond. 6 months ago, when Lisa approached me with that inconceivable request, how could I have imagined things would spiral to this point? It all began on a rainy October evening. Mark, I need to talk to you, and only you can help me. Lisa stood at our doorstep, rainwater dripping from her blonde hair. Her eyes were red. She'd obviously been crying. Emma was working an emergency overnight shift at the hospital that night. As Lisa's friend for many years, I couldn't bring myself to close the door on her. I handed her a cup of hot tea and sat at the opposite end of the living room. Lisa and Emma had been inseparable since college, long before I met Emma. For 10 years, Lisa had been a fixture in our home, Emma's steadfast supporter, and a witness to our marriage. Jack left me. Her voice trembled. Just when we were planning to have a baby, I sighed. Jack and Lisa had been married for 3 years, and I'd never fully trusted the man, but for the sake of Emma and Lisa's friendship, I'd kept my reservations to myself. I'm sorry, Lisa. When Emma gets back, we'll find a way to help you through this. She shook her head, tears flowing again. You don't understand, Mark. I'm 35, and my doctor says my ovarian reserve is rapidly declining. If I wait another year or two, I might never have my own child. I didn't comprehend why she was telling me this. I don't want a donor or sperm bank. I want someone I know, someone I trust. She looked directly into my eyes. I wanted to be you, Mark. Help me have a baby. In that moment, I felt dizzy. What? Lisa, what are you saying? I'm married to your best friend. This is insane. I know it sounds absurd, but I'm desperate. Her tears continue to fall. I won't ask you to take any responsibility. The child will be entirely mine. No one will ever know, not even Emma. It's just a favor from someone I trust. This is deception, Lisa, a betrayal of Emma. I stood up, attempting to end this preposterous conversation. She grabbed my wrist, her voice low but firm. Emma has you and your 2 children. I have nothing left. The 3 of us have supported each other since college, and now I need your help. But I know Emma would never agree to something like this. Because it's crazy. Mark, remember 3 years ago when Emma had complications giving birth to Jack, who stayed at the hospital day and night? When you needed money for your mortgage, who lent you their savings without hesitation? Her voice was accusatory. Now I'm only asking for one favor, one chance to become a mother, and you're going to refuse me? I closed my eyes in anguish. Lisa had indeed been there during our toughest times. When Emma hemorrhaged after giving birth and doctors said she might never conceive again, Lisa spent months helping our family. And now, she stood before me, asking me to give her a chance to have a child of her own. I need time to think, Lisa. This isn't a simple decision. She nodded, wiping away her tears. I understand, but please remember, my time is running out. In the weeks that followed, Lisa's request haunted me like a ghost. I couldn't concentrate at work, and I lay awake at night. Emma noticed my unusual behavior, but I blamed it on work pressure. Guilt flooded me whenever I spent time with Emma and our children. Yet, I also felt compassion for Lisa's situation. At a family gathering, when I saw Lisa watching our children play with a look of loneliness, I could barely breathe. The small family we had built, a happiness Emma and I took for granted, was an unattainable dream for Lisa. Finally, on a weekend when Emma took the kids to visit her parents, I summoned the courage to meet with Lisa. We met at a cafe on the outskirts of town, far from where acquaintances might appear. I've considered your request. I looked directly into her eyes, my voice low. If I agree, there are conditions. Her eyes brightened, but I held up my hand to indicate I wasn't finished. First, this happens only once. If it doesn't work, we stop. Second, no emotional attachment. It's purely functional. Third, nobody ever knows, especially Emma. Finally, I won't play a father role in the child's life, but if the child ever has medical needs, I'll provide necessary assistance. Lisa nodded eagerly. I completely agree. Mark, you don't know what this means to me. I felt nauseated. I had just agreed to betray my wife, my marriage vows, and all the principles I held dear. But the renewed hope on Lisa's face made me feel that perhaps this was the only right choice. I'm ovulating now, she said quietly. If you're willing, we could today. At that moment, my heart nearly stopped. Everything suddenly became so real, so imminent. But I had made my decision and couldn't back out. Okay. We checked into an inconspicuous hotel. The entire process was mechanical and awkward, devoid of passion, solely purpose-driven. Afterward, we barely made eye contact as we dressed. I felt as if a part of my soul had been torn away. Thank you, Mark, Lisa whispered, her eyes reflecting a complex mixture of emotions. Whatever the outcome, I'll be forever grateful. I could only nod, unable to speak. As I left the hotel, I felt like I had become someone else, someone I didn't know or respect. When I returned home, I took a long, hot shower, as if trying to wash away all the guilt. But no matter how hard I scrubbed, the feeling of betrayal remained deeply etched beneath my skin. 2 weeks later, Lisa sent a text. It worked. Seeing those 2 words, my world began to crumble. I had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The next 3 months were a strange dance of secrecy. Lisa withdrew from our social circle, claiming she needed time to heal from her divorce. Meanwhile, I lived in constant fear that Emma would somehow discover the truth. Each night, as I lay beside my wife, the weight of my secret threatened to suffocate me. I began staying late at work, finding it increasingly difficult to face Emma's trusting eyes. Our intimacy suffered, and Emma began to worry that I was drifting away. Is everything okay, Mark? She would ask, her brow furrowed with concern. You seem distant lately, just stressed about the Henderson account. I would lie, hating myself a little more each time. One evening, as we sat on the porch after putting the kids to bed, Emma took my hand. Whatever's bothering you, Mark, we can face it together. That's what marriage is about. Her words were like daggers to my heart. Here was this incredible woman, offering her unconditional support, while I harbored the ultimate betrayal. Lisa, meanwhile, had begun sending me updates about the pregnancy. Each message was like a ticking time bomb, counting down to the inevitable explosion of our lives. I begged her to stop, but she insisted I had a right to know about our child. The word made me physically ill. This isn't our child, Lisa. This was a favor, remember? I reminded her during a tense phone call. I know, she quickly backpedaled. Poor choice of words. Of course, it's my baby. But something in her tone worried me. There was a possessiveness, an entitlement that hadn't been part of our agreement. At the 4-month mark, Lisa insisted on meeting me. We met at a park bench, far from prying eyes. She was showing now, her hand resting protectively on the small bump. I've been thinking, Mark, she began, her eyes shining with an emotion I couldn't quite place. This child deserves to know its father. My blood ran cold. That wasn't our agreement, Lisa. You promised. I know, but things change. Don't you want to be part of this baby's life? Don't you feel any connection? Her hand reached for mine, and I recoiled. No, I don't, I said firmly, though the harshness of my words surprised even me. This was a favor to you, nothing more. I have a family, Lisa, a family I won't destroy. Her expression darkened. A family that includes my best friend, the woman who can't give you more children. The cruelty of her words stunned me. Is that what this is about? Some twisted competition with Emma? Of course not, she laughed nervously. I'm just hormonal. Forget I said anything. But as I watched her walk away, I knew with sickening certainty that I had made a catastrophic mistake. The situation deteriorated rapidly after that meeting. Lisa began showing up at my workplace, calling at odd hours, and making thinly veiled references to our secret whenever we were in group settings with friends. Emma noticed the strange behavior, but attributed it to Lisa's divorce and pregnancy. A pregnancy Lisa had explained away as the result of a brief reconciliation with Jack before their final split. I'm worried about her, Emma confided in me one night. She's becoming obsessive about this baby. It's like it's the only thing keeping her together. If only Emma knew how right she was. The breaking point came during a dinner at our home, 5 months into Lisa's pregnancy. Emma had invited her over, concerned about her friend's increasing isolation. Throughout the evening, Lisa made pointed comments, each one designed to push me to the edge. "The baby kicked today," she announced, smiling directly at me. "Strong, just like its father must have been." I nearly choked on my wine, while Emma smiled obliviously. "Jack may have been a jerk, but he had good genes," Emma replied, patting her friend's hand. Lisa's laugh chilled me to the bone. "Oh, I wasn't talking about Jack." The air seemed to vanish from the room. Emma's confusion was evident, but before she could question the statement, I hastily changed the subject. After Lisa left, I sent her a furious text. "Stop this now, or I'll tell Emma everything myself." Her response came immediately. "You wouldn't dare." She was right. I was a coward. 2 weeks later, Lisa was hospitalized with pregnancy complications. Emma, being the loyal friend she was, rushed to her side. I waited at home, sick with dread, knowing that hospitals meant medical records, blood types, potential questions that had no innocent answers. When Emma returned home that night, her face was ashen. Without a word, she handed me her phone. On the screen was the ultrasound image and a text from Lisa that shattered our world. "I know you've suspected something was wrong. The truth is, Mark is the father. I'm sorry, Emma. I never meant to hurt you, but I needed this baby, and he agreed to help me. I love you both." "How could you?" Emma whispered, her voice breaking as she paced our living room. "With her, my best friend." I had no defense, no explanation that could mitigate what I'd done. She came to me after Jack left her. She was desperate for a child before it was too late. "And you what? Decided to play hero." Emma's laugh was bitter, hollow. "Did you consider for one moment what this would do to us? To our children?" She promised no one would ever know. It was supposed to be a one-time thing, no strings attached. A one-time thing? Emma's voice rose, her control slipping. "This isn't a borrowed lawnmower, Mark. This is a child. Your child. With my best friend." The truth of her words hit me like a physical blow. In my arrogance, I had believed I could compartmentalize this act, separate it from our life together. But creating a life was not something that could be neatly contained or forgotten. "I thought I was helping her," I said weakly. "No." Emma shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You thought you could get away with it. There's a difference." She sank onto the couch, suddenly looking exhausted. "The worst part is, I understand why she did this. She's been desperate for a baby, watching us with our family, feeling left behind. But you had everything. A wife who loved you, beautiful children, and you risked it all. Why?" It was a question I had asked myself countless times over the past months. I felt indebted to her for all she's done for us over the years. When she asked, I couldn't say no. "You couldn't say no?" Emma's eyes flashed. "You couldn't say no to sleeping with another woman? To fathering her child? Those seem like very reasonable things to say no to, Mark." I had no response, no justification that wouldn't sound like an excuse. "What happens now?" I finally asked, dreading the answer. Emma stared at the wall, her expression unreadable. "I don't know. Lisa wants you involved in the child's life. She's made that clear. And what do you want?" She turned to me, her eyes reflecting a pain I couldn't begin to fathom. "I want to go back to 6 months ago, before you destroyed everything I thought we had." "Emma, please. Don't." She held up her hand. "I need time. Time to figure out if there's anything left to save here." She stood and walked to the door, pausing with her hand on the knob. "You know what hurts the most? Not the betrayal, though that's excruciating. It's that for years, I've carried the guilt of not being able to give you more children. And all this time, you were creating life with someone else." The door closed behind her with a soft click, more devastating than any slam could have been. The fallout was swift and merciless. Emma moved out, taking our children to her sister's house. Lisa, emboldened by the revelation, began making demands about my involvement in the coming child's life. Our friends chose sides, most rallying around Emma, while looking at me with a mixture of disgust and pity. At work, rumors spread, and I found myself increasingly isolated. Each night, I returned to an empty house, haunted by the ghosts of the life I had destroyed. 3 weeks after Emma left, she agreed to meet me at a cafe. My heart leaped with hope, but her first words crushed it. "I've consulted a divorce attorney," she said, her voice steady but distant. "I think it's best if we keep this as amicable as possible for the children's sake." "Emma, please." I reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "I made a terrible mistake, but our marriage is worth fighting for." "Is it?" She looked at me, truly looked at me, for the first time since that night. "Because when Lisa asked you to cross that line, our marriage wasn't worth fighting for then." Her words struck home with painful accuracy. "What about the kids?" I asked, my voice breaking. "They're confused, hurt. Jack asked me yesterday if Daddy doesn't love us anymore." Her eyes welled with tears. "What am I supposed to tell them, Mark?" "That Daddy loved them, but not enough to keep our family whole." I felt physically ill. "I'll always love them. And you." "This wasn't about love, Emma." "Then what was it about?" "Lust? Ego? The thrill of having something forbidden?" "No." I shook my head vehemently. "It was about obligation, misplaced loyalty. I convinced myself I owed her this." Emma was silent for a long moment. "The irony is, I might have understood if you'd come to me first. If you told me about Lisa's request, as outrageous as it was. We could have found another way to help her. But you chose deception. Would you really have understood?" I asked skeptically. "I don't know," she admitted. "But you never gave me the chance to try." As she stood to leave, I made one last desperate plea. "Tell me what I can do, Emma. Anything to fix this." She looked down at me, her eyes reflecting an ocean of sadness. "That's the problem, Mark. Some things can't be fixed. They can only be survived." In the months that followed, I lived in a state of suspended animation, going through the motions of life without truly living it. The divorce proceedings moved forward, coldly dismantling the life we had built together. I saw my children on weekends, their innocent questions about why Mommy and Daddy didn't live together anymore, cutting deeper than any legal document could. Lisa gave birth to a healthy baby girl in spring. She named her Hope, a cruel irony given the hopelessness that had enveloped all our lives. Despite my initial resistance, I found myself drawn to the innocent child who bore my features in her tiny face. She had done nothing wrong, deserved none of the chaos that surrounded her entry into the world. One afternoon, as I sat in Lisa's living room, holding Hope while Lisa prepared a bottle, the full weight of my choices crashed down upon me. This child, this innocent life, would grow up in the shadow of betrayal and broken trust. My older children would always know her as the reason their family fell apart. And for what? A moment of misguided altruism, a failure to stand firm in my principles. "She has your eyes," Lisa said softly, returning with the bottle. "Everyone notices it." "Lisa," I began, my voice tight with emotion, "what have we done? Really, what have we done?" She sat beside me, her expression somber. "We created a life, Mark. A beautiful, innocent life. At the cost of destroying others," I replied. "Was it worth it?" She took Hope from my arms, cradling her protectively. "For me, yes. She's everything I've ever wanted." Her eyes met mine, filled with a complex mixture of emotions. "But I'm sorry for the pain I've caused. I never thought Emma would find out. I never meant for things to go this far." "But they did," I said quietly, "and we can't undo it." "No," she agreed. "We can only go forward." A year after Hope's birth, I stood in a park, watching my older children play on the swings. Emma sat beside me on the bench, a careful distance between us. These co-parenting meetups had become our new normal, a fragile piece built from the ruins of our marriage. "Jack got an A on his science project," Emma said, breaking the silence. "He wants to show it to you. I'm proud of him." I replied, my heart aching for the daily moments I now missed. Emma hesitated, then asked the question she'd been avoiding for months. "How's Hope?" I was surprised by her inquiry. "She's good, growing fast, starting to say a few words." Emma nodded, her gaze fixed on our children. "I saw Lisa at the grocery store last week. First time since everything. It was awkward, but we spoke briefly." "That's good, I think." "I don't know what it is," she admitted. "But I'm tired of carrying the anger, Mark. It's exhausting." I turned to look at her, this woman I had loved and betrayed. Emma, I know it doesn't change anything, but I need you to know how deeply I regret what I did. Not just because of the consequences, but because I hurt you in a way you never deserved. She was quiet for so long I thought she wouldn't respond. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. The hardest lesson I've learned from all this is that love isn't enough. Neither is regret. Some wounds don't heal, they just become part of who we are. Do you think, someday, you might forgive me? I asked, already knowing the answer. I'm trying, she said honestly. Not for you, but for me. For our children. Holding on to this bitterness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something, a tiny crack in the wall between us. Thank you, I said simply. As we sat there, watching our children play in the fading afternoon light, I was struck by the irrevocable nature of choices. One decision, made in a moment of misguided compassion, had altered the trajectory of so many lives. There would be no going back to what was, only forward into what could be. In that quiet moment, I made a silent promise to both my families, the one I had broken and the one I had created. I would spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of them, to rebuild what trust one could, to be honest in ways I hadn't been before. It wouldn't erase the past, but perhaps it could redeem the future. Some choices can't be undone. Some betrayals leave permanent scars. But even in the wreckage, there exists the possibility of grace. Not the grace of forgetting, but the grace of continuing, of building something new from the rubble of what's been destroyed. Not a restoration, but a reformation. And in that knowledge, painful as it was, I found a measure of peace.